I'm Al McFarland. Welcome to the conversation with Al McFarland. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. As always, I promise to deliver a robust conversation. Today, I promise will be no exception. I'm excited to be meeting and beginning a relationship with Rick Dildine. Now, maybe saying the name wrong. I was prepped on it before the show. Rick, I'm going to ask you to forgive me if I've messed it up and to straighten me out so that we can be proper in moving this conversation forward. But Rick is going to be coming to Twin Cities as the new creative director at Children's Theater. We have had a historic and beautiful relationship with Children's Theater Company over the years. Peter Brocius, our friend, is retiring. He's done a great thing in bringing the Children's Theater to a space of national importance and reach and service. And I think it's wonderful that the successor is positioned to do the same and even greater. Rick, first of all, welcome to the conversation with Al McFarland. How are you?
Hello. Hey, I'm so glad to be with you today. Thanks for having me. Rick Dildine. Dildine. You're so close. You're so close.
Excellent. Well, now I got it. Rick Dildine. Well, let me just say in introducing you from your bio that Rick oversees currently all of the artistic programming and sets the creative vision for the Alabama Shakespeare Festival, right?
Right. Yep.
Okay. And it's one of the largest Shakespeare festivals in the country. In 2018, he launched ASF's most significant commissioning endeavor to date with the State of the South, a tour and new Southern Canon Project. Playwrights currently under commission include Pulitzer and Tony Award winner Robert Schenken, who's the most produced playwright in America, Lauren Gunderson, Whiting Award winner Danetta Lavinia Grays, and Broadway playwright Mansa Ra. The resulting 22-play canon will represent the largest body of work about the South in decades. So since joining ASF, he has reinstated the repertory model, which nearly doubled the subscription base and added a significant number of new subscribers to their program, launched a training program for early career theater artists, and established partnerships with the Montgomery Public Schools, which, by the way, is 90% BIPOC students. Also with Alabama State University, which is a historically Black college university, and the Equal Justice Initiative. In 2018, the late Congressman John Lewis invited ASF to perform at the Congressional Black Caucus in Washington, D.C. And in 2020, Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Congressman Lewis led a delegation of 100 members of Congress to Montgomery to celebrate the work with young people. So under his leadership at ASF, audience of color have grown more than 40%. And for his efforts to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion in American theater, Dildine was awarded the Standout Award from the Society of Directors and Choreographers in 2019. There's much more in the bio, but I'm going to let that information come directly from my guest today, Brother Rick. Welcome again. So good to see you, and I'm glad that we have this chance to talk.
Likewise. I'm looking forward to joining you all in the Twin Cities.
Well, let's talk about that first. There's no script here. Let's talk first about what you know of Twin Cities, number one, and what you know of CTC, and how that invitation and opportunity has unfolded for you, and what do you see yourself bringing and doing as the leader of this institution?
Well, the first time I ever came to Minnesota was probably 20 years ago, and I flew into Minneapolis and then drove to see friends in Duluth for New Year's. Mm-hmm. So my first introduction to Minnesota was it's cold, colder than anything this Southern boy has ever experienced. But through the years, as a theater maker, I've really thrown myself into regional theater. Like, I'm a regional theater guy. So I've always stayed on top of what's going on around the country. And Minneapolis is known for being one of those great theater, artistic cultural cities where artists can live and thrive, and it's supported. And a few years ago, I guess it was about coming out of the pandemic, I said, I don't know enough about Minneapolis. So coming, and I started like making little trips up there and getting to know people. And then I was approached about this opportunity. It was a unique opportunity for me, but CTC is the country's leader in multi-generational programming, hands down. And I was so impressed with the artistry, with the commitment to excellence, that it was something I wanted to know more about. And now here we are.
Let me share some more of your background. Before ASF, you were the artistic director of the Shakespeare Festival of St. Louis, and yeah, and growing attendance is a critical, I think, capability that you bring to your projects. There, festival attendance grew 55% and revenue grew 38%. You've gotten all kinds of awards in that organization, including Arts Organization of the Year from the Missouri Arts Council, the Exemplary Community Achievement Award from the Missouri Humanities Council, and the prestigious Excellence in the Arts Award from the Arts and Education Council of Greater St. Louis. In 2014, you were named the Artist of the Year by the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. You were part of the under 40 honorees by the St. Louis Business Journal, and you recognized on the city's power list of 100 people who are reshaping the city. And in 17, the St. Louis Theater Award for Best Director for your production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. And the St. Louis Post-Dispatch named you Best Director for the 2016-2017 season. You're a leader. You're a leader. And so talk about you and talk about those accomplishments. And I'm still getting you to talk about how that's going to show up here in your work and your vision for Minnesota and children's theater.
Thank you for all that's very nice, Al. I have always been drawn to theater outside of New York, theater outside of LA, outside of those major cities. I like throwing myself into a community and being part of it. I grew up in a small town in Arkansas, a town where I knew everybody. My parents knew everybody. We knew all your business. But inside of that, there is what I learned in that small town is storytelling and the importance of community, the importance of knowing who your neighbor is. How can you help your neighbor, your friends, your community be better? And I bring that to my work. The success we've had at these various different places is because I think arts institutions, I think the better word for them is civic institutions, because they're led by trustees, people who they have been entrusted with the mission. They have been entrusted to use the resources to make the community better. And for this one, particularly to enrich the lives of young people. I think right now, coming out of this pandemic, and probably really anytime, I think the most noble thing an artist can do is create something for a young person. And that is something that I'm particularly drawn to right now, is how do we tell young people that it is okay to have big thoughts. It's okay to have complex thoughts. It's okay to maybe not know what to say, but give them the words and the language to do so. Whenever I've come into a theater, the number one job of an artistic director is to listen to the community. Hands down, listen to the community and know who it is. What are its hopes? What are its struggles? And that's gonna be one of my primary tasks when I get there. We're gonna have a 100-day plan of how we're going to transition me into the organization. And I'm really excited about being part of this community. And the notes and the feedback I've gotten so far has just been, I'm not surprised from Midwestern folk. I'm not surprised at all.
How well did you know Peter, or how well have you gotten to know him? And I asked the question with sharing that I hold him in such high esteem. He's just a wonderful human being,
Oh,
and he's done phenomenal work at CTC. What's been
yeah.
your relationship with him so far?
I have just gotten to know Peter through this process.
Mm-hmm.
We've spoken several times, and we're working on a handoff ourselves right now.
Sure.
But what I knew of Peter before this, he's a lion in American
Mm-hmm.
theater. He is his energy is contagious. He's exuberant. He is passionate. And what I love about the institution that he's created is he has given value to young people and their voice and their place in the world. And he has given them rigorous work, thoughtful work. That is so, and that's why this theater is the leader in the country, is because it's lifted up the minds and the space of young people.
What's going to be the shift from your focus on Shakespeare work and CTC work? What's the connection, number one, and how does that energy, that investment, and that skill that you've cultivated over the years transform itself into the new arena of children and family and intergenerational focused activity?
Every time I didn't go into Shakespeare because I was a Shakespeare guy. Like, Shakespeare kind of got me.
Mm-hmm.
I took over Shakespeare St. Louis because I had previously run a outdoor theater, and Shakespeare St. Louis is about all free Shakespeare in public parks. And so I was drawn to the scale of it. I was drawn to bringing people together. The thing that I start with every Shakespeare play, and this is what I will bring into this work here, Shakespeare can feel very highbrow. It can feel very inaccessible. And what I have worked on doing is always asking my actors and my artists is, what do you know about this?
Mm-hmm.
These Shakespeare people are mothers and fathers and
Mm-hmm.
sons and brothers. What do you know about this? And give me a story that I can relate to. I always want to, create things that are going to make kids fall in love with theater. One rule I have for myself is delight my 8-year-old self and my 80-year-old self.
There we go.
At that intersection is the type of plays I'm trying to make. So coming into this, I want to bring that same energy, in working with kids. Kids are brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Asking them, what do you know about this? When we're putting stories together, what can you bring to this table? That's where I plan on starting. The scale of work CTC is known for certainly lends itself to the scale of Shakespeare, which is pretty big and epic. But it all comes back to that human question. What do you know about this?
And so what do we have to do with the community and with parents and with members of community to get them to appreciate and value the capacity of young people to create in earnest? I think what you do is recognize and nurture that talent, that skill, that ability that young people bring, their curiosity, right? And I think that too often ordinary, well-meaning people don't take the time to appreciate and respect how much learning and knowledge young people are experiencing and acquire, and are prepared to put forth, in building community from where they stand. What do you think?
Yeah, something we did at Alabama, here at Alabama Shakes, we instituted something called the town hall. And it was an intergenerational response to our plays. And we would put together panels that one of the rules was it had to be made up of people from different generations to give value and to hear other experiences and to lift up that to all generations, to lift them up, I think is so incredibly important. And putting young people in opportunities where they can discover be curious in a safe environment. That's what theater is. You know, I mean, how many times, I mean, out, you know, in your life, if you had to try something and go, well, I'm never doing that again, that didn't
Right.
work.
Right.
But to give young people a safe space where they can discover, ask questions, that's what the arts do. That's what theater does. You know, something I'm really interested in putting on stage is when we're thinking about growing audience as well, is the intersection of sports and theater,
Hmm. Hmm.
teams and casts,
Mm-hmm.
director, coach. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there is an immense amount of teamwork,
Mm-hmm.
collaboration, trust, vulnerability that goes into both those groups. Young people are all in sports today. That's something I'm interested in doing, is figuring out a creative way, a
Hmm.
theatrical way. What if you got to watch a soccer game happen on stage, but
Mm-hmm.
laced in a story with that, or a hockey game? I mean, that would be really, really exciting for young people to be able to bring that in. I love theater because, you know, when you might not be able to find the words for something, you can point to somebody on stage and go, I did connect with that character. I connect with that story. And that's a great conduit for young people, all people.
What do you see as programming, scheduling for your coming in? What's going to be happening for it programmatically?
Yeah, you know, we're going to be continuing that support of new work. CTC is known for developing new work and being at the front line of what is happening today in multi-generational programming. You know, we have this amazing relationship called Generation Now, where we're commissioning new plays, and we have 4 theaters that we're working with. So we're going to be that's going to be one of the key things. The continuing to hit upon those different age groups as well. I'm
Mm-hmm.
particularly interested in growing that 0 to 5-year-old age group. I think that's a particularly sweet spot for us to continue looking at. But in February, March, and I'm not going to step on Peter's toes yet, but we'll be announcing the next season about that time of what we'll be doing. But folks should expect that same timeline and that
Mm-hmm.
same commitment to multi-generational programming.
When you say 0 to 5, the sweet spot, what do you mean by that?
You know, that's like the littles. That's the
Mm-hmm.
littles that have no filter, and creating worlds where they can delight. You know, I do think I don't have kids, but I do know I have a lot of friends who have kids, and there's this
Mm-hmm.
time when they're born to a certain moment where they don't get to take up. They like, I can't take them to a theater, you know. But if we can create a space where families can come together and go, hey, it's okay if they're loud, it's okay if they walk around, it's okay if they talk back, and nurture that sense of curiosity and delight, I think that's
Mm-hmm.
good for families. I think it's good for young people.
Oh, I agree. I think that's amazing. That's a wonderful idea. You know, I remember bringing our grandson there to watch. I forgot the production, but he was a toddler, really, really small kid, and they had a room where an infant could be, you know, with parents with infant type children could be, and not feel the pressure that parents feel. You know,
Yeah.
if your kid is going to be more active or more loud or whatever. And so I appreciated the sensitivity that showed at that time. And you're talking about taking it further than that, designing a process that intentionally includes that learning experience and that teaching experiences that children provide by their presence.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at your notes again. You're a graduate of Wachita Baptist University and Brown University with a MFA in acting. You grew up in, you said, a small town. Is it Wynne, Arkansas?
That's right. Wynne, Arkansas. Yep.
Okay. And that you've taught or served on the staff of Brown University, of Clark University in Atlanta, I think, right, Clark?
This is Clark, actually, in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Worcester, okay, different.
Yeah,
And
different
then
Clark.
Webster University. And at Webster, you were the director of the MFA Arts Management and Leadership Program and adjunct professor within its BFA performance program. And you're also an alumnus and instructor of the Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival, and a national judge for the Irene Ryan Acting Award. How did you bring yourself and discover your passion, your path in the arts?
I through a teacher, an 8th grade teacher. And Al, when I was in 8th grade, it was the day before Christmas break, and our English teacher said, if you all will read a book over Christmas, I'll give you, when you write a book report, I'll give you bonus points. And I desperately needed those bonus points. And so I went to the library and just went to try to find, I wanted to find somebody that had written a lot. I was like, I'm going to read more than one thing. And I read 8 things by this one person. And I went back and told my teacher, I read 8 books over the break. And I was like, oh, I learned about love and family and betrayal and greed. And she was like, Miss Gregson was like, who did you read? And I'm sure she wanted me to say something like William Shakespeare. Instead, I said, Miss Gregson, Danielle Steele has so many amazing books. And she was mortified that I'd read Danielle Steele novels my entire Christmas break. And so she put in my hand, she said, why don't we start here? And she gave me Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare. And that was my introduction into theater and into the arts and reading and the appreciation for language and storytelling. I think words matter. I think stories matter. I think it is so vitally important to pass down stories from family to family, from parent to child. I'm taking my mother through a process where she gets a different question every week, and she has to write a paragraph about this question.
Okay.
With my brother and my nephews. I got into that, and I appreciated the simple storytelling components of someone passing on something to someone else. And that just grew into a greater passion. I did summer stock. I've worked in every department in theater. And then that led to ultimately running theaters, which I didn't even know was a job. I didn't know you could run a theater. And when I was 25, I got my first theater that I ran, and just started going from there. And it's been an amazing experience, taking me all over the country. And it's a great, incredible art form. It's an incredible art form.
I'm Al McFarland. This is The Conversation with Al McFarland. My guest is Rick Dildine. He's with the, soon to be with the Minneapolis Children's Theater Company, is doing work presently with Alabama Shakespeare Festival. And I'm glad to have you on the show. Rick, I wanted to, as you were describing how you got into it, to come back to, you said you love words. And I think for me, that's always the best place to start in trying to understand an artist or a person's entry into an arena. So, what do words mean to you? I'm a writer, and I spend a lot of time thinking about what a word is and what a word does, And so as a writer, I'm asking you to meditate for a second and talk about, the nature of language, of words.
That is a great question. I love that.
And you're being a human being.
Yeah, I love that. I am a director first, so I am always trying to excavate why the writer put these words in this order. What are they telling us? Because those are choices. I have such immense respect for writers who are able to put a thought down on paper. And then those writers who are able to turn that into some level of poetry. And I say poetry because a novel, I feel like, can be poetic. The language you use, the rhythm you use, how long are your sentences. I love that writers can do that. I can't do that, but I can interpret that. And for me, that's the fun part with working with an actor, to navigate, why did that writer put that comma there? Why did they end that there? And with Shakespeare, you have a lot of that. I just did a Midsummer Night's Dream, and I changed it. I set it all inside the mind of a child, and the whole show took place within this child's mind in their attic. But to sit with the kid and go like, all right, why do you think they said this phrase like this? And oh my gosh, that is a gold mine from a child. But that's what I love about trying to figure out with writers. I like navigating that. I like bringing thoughts to life. Words, when they are spoken and performed by a skilled actor, they have the ability to like hit us right in the chest and to lift us up in thought and to take that in for ourselves. It's not every time, it's not every show, but when it does, it is something. And people have felt that with a song. There's phrases where like 5 words together, you go, oh my gosh, that hits me in my life.
That's great. And so I talk to artists a lot and ask them to describe their feeling on stage when they're presenting or performing, because I'm curious about what I always, as an audience member, observe as a moment of transcendence or of transformation. I see the room change. Something happened that didn't happen a minute before, the minute before. It's happening right now. And the happening might not last more than a second. It might last only a shiver, right? But it's something that's palpable almost. And so that is the question I always ask performers and artists and musicians. But it's an appropriate question for you because you are packaging the experience. You're the curator of all of the elements that bring all of that together, more than just the singer or just the creator of the word, but how that operates in an ecosystem. And so what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Am I describing that properly, first of all?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. You've got it's what a director does. You're navigating the emotional journey of the audience. And music affects me a lot. And so as a person, when I was a kid, I thought I wanted to write music for movies. I thought I wanted to be a film scorer.
Okay.
And like that is the job of a director, is how do you take an audience on an emotional journey? And a lot of times it comes down to coaching breath. How is the actor using breath? How does lighting and music and rhythm all come together? Sometimes it's like slow down here, speed up here. But, like I will ask my design team all the time, I'll come together and say, hey, for me, this story is about, and I never use more than 10 words. Like, I got to get it to less than 10 words so that they can respond to something tangible. For instance, Romeo and Juliet, a story we've all heard. It's been around for hundreds of years. People have made fun of it. I chose that as my first Shakespeare play here in Montgomery because at the time, Montgomery Public Schools had just been taken over by state intervention. And I wanted to do a story about what does it mean when a community fails its young people. And so, like with Romeo and Juliet, I said, we're going to tell a story about what it means to fail young people. So then how do we pull in music that can help lift that up? How do we create a set that lifts that up? What does the costuming do to lift that up? Yeah, orchestrating all of that is my jam. That's what I do.
Well, it's got to be exciting. And so go back in your personal growing up, the genes to be creative. What's your family story?
Oh, that's my father was a farmer. Grandfathers were farmers. Great grandfathers were farmers. My brother is a farmer. My mother, I got my I don't know, my work ethic I mean, being a farmer, that's an incredibly hard job. And my
Hmm.
father was such a hard worker. My mother, you know, she started out, she went to college, but left after one semester. She started out as the receptionist at a bank.
Hmm.
And last summer, 46 and a half years later, she retired as the CFO of that bank.
Okay.
She went back to school while I was in high school, got her
Mhm.
degree,
Mhm.
and an amazing woman. But I grew up in a small town. I recently found out there is a famous puppet family with my last name, and I'm gonna that was in the 60s and 70s, and all of their materials are in the Library of Congress. So I'm about to go look at all of their stuff that's been put into the Library of Congress. But I don't know. I don't have anybody in my immediate life that was artistic or trying to push, you know, or encouraging that. My mother was a great encourager of it.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, all my family is, you know, hard workers.
Mhm.
That's
Where's your name come from?
it comes
Dildine.
from, yeah, it comes from the border of France and Germany. And
Okay.
I've always felt like a little bit French and a little bit German.
Okay. Have you been to both?
I have. I did. I have. I actually spent a year ago. I got to spend the summer in Berlin and get
Mhm.
to go to the area where my family's name is supposedly from. Yeah.
So I asked the question with an idea of getting people's sense of where their family story fits into the landscape of the country and of the world right now. And you said that your dad and your brothers were farmers, and probably your grands were farmers, and you've mentioned about your mom's work in the economic world. And you also said that you're from a small town in the South. I'm always thinking about the history of ourselves and our community as Americans. And the
Mhm.
history that I always talk first about is the history that comes through my own life and eyes as an African American, as a Black person. And it leads to the question about how both your background, your upbringing, and your pursuit of study and work lead to uh, also both reflecting and shaping um, the culture that we're in, the community that we're in, the future. I raise that because my expectation is that all of us are seeking to create community that celebrates life and that elevates integrity and elevates the notion of freedom and the notion of possibility. But we are there at the same time while we must recognize the inequity in the world and the pain and the hurt in the world. So that's a way of asking you to share how you consider those things that are not just theater, but theater's at the center of it all. And theater is a place to examine the all in a way, as you described earlier, that gives you a chance to make some mistakes or decisions or to discover things. What do you think?
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind listening to you is I think a lot of times people think that what a director does is we tell everybody what to do, where to walk, how to feel, and it's not so there's a little bit of that direction,
Mhm.
but so much about what I do is trying to understand who a person is,
Mhm.
who they inherently are, the actor, the designer, the writer, and then putting together a group of people who can all respond and bring their whole self to. I can't imagine asking somebody to be in a project and then completely changing them or just doing it myself.
Mhm.
So that means like getting to know who a person is. What is their story? What are their values? What is their point of view on the world? And then putting together those groups to tell a story. And that story then will take on that specificity, which is what I think our stories have to be steeped in, is specificity. But that specificity only comes from someone being able to be in a room and bring their full self to it.
Mhm.
And, like my upbringing is people centric, is people oriented. So much about what I do is about people and listening, but really it's so much about listening.
So you're coming to George Floyd's town,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a town that is sensitive to itself and how it shows up in the world. And it's sensitive to its experience with the Americans that were here before Europeans came. And it's sensitive to the immigrations of Africans who left slave systems in the South. And in recent years, Africans from the Caribbean and from Africa, but people from Asia, and from Latin America and from Europe, from Russia. A lot of stuff going on here that's rich. And how does that give you a palette to work with? And what do you see as challenges? As I'm thinking, Rick, I'm thinking if it's a fair question to ask you, how has theater failed community? And I know the loaded part of that is which part of community, but let me leave it and you can take it wherever you want.
Sure.
And I don't want to leave it there because I also want to say how will and how must theater save community and solve problems and be responsible, do its part in ensuring that we're building the most human-centered experience that we can build, or not just humans, but the best experience that living people can have.
When I came to ASF and I interviewed for the job, I'm a very mission-driven person. I believe that a mission for a not-for-profit should be just out of reach. It should be just out of reach. And the mission at ASF is to build community. And I love that, to build community with theater. I went and looked at every single play ASF had ever done. And what I discovered was that less than 11% of the plays had been written by women, when Montgomery is 51% women.
Mm-hmm.
Less than 5% of the plays had been written by playwrights of color, when Montgomery is 60% Black, 3% Korean, 3% Hispanic. And my challenge to the board was, if your mission is to build community, you can't ignore large swaths of your community. Mm-hmm. And that's where we started from.
And so right there at that point, has there and is there a shift in the understanding of what community is now? Because I would say that a generation ago or 2 generations ago, theater people, and this is my probably unfair characterization, I'm just putting my flaws out there, just that my characterization of the quote unquote theater was that a place to continue the elevation of a European construction of what the world is. Europeans think that the world is their idea. And so this was reinforcement of that, not only for Europeans, but for everybody else on the planet. And the technology and the systems and processes allowed that system to go forward. But the rest of the world has existed despite that myopic, and chauvinistic advance from that point of view. I would say that's failure from my point of view, but it might not be from the Europeans' point of view. What do you think?
Yeah. Mr. Shakespeare's had a good run. Yeah, we've institutionalized a large set of assumptions instead of practicing the muscle of curiosity, acceptance. At ASF, we have grown our audiences of color significantly by 40%. And that is from programming in a way that the community leans into it and says, this, I'm part of this. This is part of us. I think audiences, that they speak with their pocketbooks, and our subscribers have grown. Our donations have grown. But yeah, we have to practice that muscle of curiosity and also calling out assumptions. I try to build out a world where people can see each other. And one of the first things I produced, I'd forgotten about this. First things I produced when I got to ASF was I programmed a public reading of the Declaration of Independence. And I asked our board to cast it for me. And I broke it down into 50 phrases. And I asked them to get the most recent census, and they had to look at who we are. And I said, using the who we are, and we broke it into like the basic numbers, cast this show.
To reflect.
They begin to go, and you hear them talking about each other and their community and really reflecting. Yeah. That was an amazing exercise and that was, board driven, thereby community driven, trustees, really say, who are we as we're publicly reading the Declaration of Independence? That's powerful. Again, words matter.
And so what do you see forward? I think that the technology that we have now with social media and this access to each other like we are right now, globally, I think it's a new arena of opportunity. What do you see as the expanding or evolving role of theater like CTC in the future? And on several fronts. One is how it touches individuals, actors, students, their families, the community, but also how, as you've mentioned, you've got several projects that are happening around the country at the same time that CTC is involved with. Where do you see this going? And what's going to be the consequence, the impact of that in enriching the lives of our people, of all people?
I am particularly interested in how to get our work to the ability of being able to stream around the world. We have partnerships with Mayi Theater, the Latino Theater Company, Native Voices at the Autry, Penumbra. And I'm really interested in how to capture that work and then to allow it to be streamed all over the world. I'm in a rural state in Alabama. And when the first time we made one of our shows accessible, we didn't know what was going to happen. We filmed it. 20,000 kids watched it.
Wow.
But they're mostly in rural places they can't make that trip. So getting that work out for around the world, there are a couple of theaters in the world that have strong streaming services, and I'm interested in us being the voice for young people's programming around the world. And then, continuing to build out these partnerships with these theaters is really particularly exciting to me. What was the second part of your question?
I don't remember. Once I say it, I'm done. I'm done with it. So
well, maybe it'll come back to us.
It'll come back. It'll come back up. But as you're speaking now, I'm looking at you, and the question in my mind now is, talk about Rick, the 5-year-old Rick. When you first remember being able to be aware, what did the world look like, and who were you? And so the question leads to the progression of your development. You've already talked about where you are, sort of how you got here. And I always use that as a way to contextualize the idea of your and your family's place in history, and how we all are connected to, both the good and the bad, but also have an opportunity to keep building. But 5 years old, 3 years old, when you first started thinking or becoming aware that you existed, what were you thinking?
I was energetic, very creative, very what's the word? Extroverted. I liked people. I liked making things and being creative. So I was always a daydreamer. I was always coming up with new projects for me and the neighborhood kids to do. I wasn't so much into the farm as my dad would have liked for me to be, but I was definitely a creative kid. Yeah.
And you said eighth grade, you got some feedback that sets you in a direction to theater. Between your 5 years old and being an eighth grader, what was life like for you? What were the highlights?
Yeah, life. I had a great childhood. I grew up in a middle class household. We got one vacation a year. My mother took me to the library a lot. Reading was a great outlet for me. Summers were spent running around the neighborhood. It was a nice childhood. I felt very lucky to, we were not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, but I was rich in people. Every Sunday, we had family members we met with every single Sunday. Like my family, there were lovely family traditions. And I have a younger brother, like I said, who has taken on the farm mantle and has carried that forward.
What do you want to see in the world today? What do you want to see? You can look at anything in the headlines. It can be politics or culture or peace or war. What's your sort of your second mind focus on? I know your focus is on the work and the work with theater, but how would you describe the environment that's operating in, and how does that environment both shape, mold, impede, or invigorate your ability to create and to serve and to be? Rick?
I worry about the extremism we continually find ourselves in humanity. I worry about selfish acts. Those are the two things that instantly come together that I think about a lot. We live in a binary world that is so extreme, good, bad, and there seems to be no place to. It seems to be difficult to see people want to come together and move something forward, and to see it trickle down from a national level down to local levels, and animosity that really worries me. I grew up in a place where I knew all the school board members, and they were all good people, and they were making really level-headed decisions. And now I see things happening at school board levels that I'm like, what is going on? I worry about that. I worry about too much emphasis on self instead of being selfless. Theater so much is about collaborating and coming together to move a story forward and move something forward. And I worry that if we don't have those skills, how can we move some things forward for us as humans?
Yeah. Take a sponsored break and we'll come back and wrap up. I'm going to ask you what you want from the community here in Minnesota to support your work and the work that you're creating at Children's Theater. I'm Al McFarland. We'll be right back. Are you or someone you know recovering financially from the COVID-19 pandemic, the lockdown, or any other reason? If so, help is available. findhelp.org is a site to find a wide range of resources, including food, medical care, and more. The best part is based on your zip code. Visit findhelp.org, enter your zip code and the service you need. You'll get a map directing you to the organizations that can help you. Help is waiting at findhelp.org. If you need help starting anew, findhelp.org is the site for you. I'm back. I'm Al McFarland. This is The Conversation with Al McFarland. I'm so pleased to have this conversation with Rick Dildine. He's the new leader at Children's Theater Company, the successor to, I'll call him the great Peter Grosius, who's retiring very soon. Rick's going to be taking the mantle and taking the work forward. And so, Rick, thank you for taking time to be here and to share your vision and your thoughts. I wanted to close on allowing you to talk about what this community can do. What do you want Minneapolis and St. Paul and Minnesota to do to show up, not just for you, but for the children, show up for itself in an arena that children's theater represents? What do you think? And take your time, stretch out on it. Yeah.
Okay. What I said in my interview, I said, I really like the Children's Theater Company I see before me today. Mm-hmm. And Peter has taken this mission to this point, and I want to build on those bright spots to move forward. I don't see a children's theater company that needs to be reinvented. I want to build on those bright spots. One thing that people can do, and it's the entry level, is buy a ticket, mm-hmm. is bring a young person. And it doesn't have to be, a child, your grandchildren, your neighbor's kids. A significant part of our audience doesn't have kids. It comes without kids. Mm-hmm. is to come to this. That ticket is supporting the work of this community, which is the young people. I think that's like the greatest place for us to focus as a community. Like I said, I don't have kids, but I believe in community. I have nephews that I want them to grow up being curious, have an understanding of fellow man, mm-hmm. fellow person in this world. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing that I encourage folks to do. I'm going to have, we're going to have like a time where I'm going to be out and about in the community. I encourage them to reach out and say like, hey, if there's events that they think I should see or be a part of, I want to get to know the stakeholders. Who are the major institutions that are playing an important role in young people's lives? Please reach out to CTC. That's a great way, because we're putting together my transition plan right now. And I'll be in the lobby for all the shows. So I want to meet folks. And it's going to take me some time to learn, to figure out Minnesota. But I'm really excited by it. Like I said, a couple of weeks ago when I was chatting with the staff, it's like, I feel like I found my people. I feel like I found my people.
Well, I think you have. I bet you have. I love that you described the Twin Cities as a very vibrant and rich place for art and artists. And it certainly is that. And I think that you'll be a great addition to it. And I believe you probably have found your people in deciding to come to Children's Theater, and your people have found you as well. Well, listen, Rick, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I look forward to working with you, collaborating with you, promoting you, and supporting the critical work you do. I call that work both educational and healing. The power of it is the power to illuminate what healing is and what it means, and how we get there, and how we each can have it and be part of the process of healing.
Yeah.
Rick, thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Al. Thank you very much.
Take care. All right. I'm Al McFarland. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.